right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, 7 lives were taken during the summer due to drownings. Advocates are now pushing for further action on water safety. We speak with founder and executive director Kaitlin Krause from Rising Tide Effect. Next up, lawmakers introduced a bill that would penalize drivers for injuring or causing the deaths of pets and service animals. We speak with executive director Libby Post from the New York State Animal Protection Federation. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesch and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at bronxnet.tv. According to a city council analysis, many communities lack access to swimming and water activity programs, with more than 3 million New Yorkers living in city council districts without a single public pool. Recently, a hearing was held to talk about solutions to prevent drownings at city beaches and pools. Here to talk to us more about it is Kaitlin Krause from the Rising Tide Effect. And first of all, thanks for coming here today.
Thank you for having me,
David.
David.
It's our pleasure. Let's talk a little about you. First of all, you're a swimmer.
I am.
And you're familiar with Lehman College. You've been here before, right?
I am. I had the privilege of getting to compete here growing up. Before going to college and swimming, so I'm familiar with the campus, but I've never been in this deep, so it's really beautiful.
Well, it's a beautiful pool we have here at
Yes,
Lehman.
it is.
It really is. Let's talk about a little bit about the Rising Tide Effect. What does this organization stand for? How is it founded? Maybe you can give us a little history.
Sure. So it kind of goes back to early days when I was much younger, and my mom introduced swimming to me as a young kid. I loved it. I took to it right away, and I knew as a young person that this was my passion, which is really, I think, rare. And I've been able to follow it the rest of my life. I went and competed for Siena College, which is D1, on a full scholarship. Outside of school, I went and worked in finance for a bit, and then I started working for a private for-profit swim school. And what I learned there was as we went from 3 to 14 locations, I realized that the people whose neighborhoods we were coming into and serving, a lot of those youth would not be able to access the lessons.
Why is that?
Well,
Why was that?
It was a cost situation.
Okay.
And you also need a lot of parent support to get signed up, to go, to actually attend consistently. So it was a tough situation. And when COVID happened, I realized I had this skill. I know I can help people in this way, and I'd like to do that. So I started the Rising Tide Effect. Now,
is the purpose of the foundation to teach people how to swim, to prevent drownings? Is it both? What's the main focus of the not-for-profit?
Our main focus is to serve the most underserved communities in New York City. So think children experiencing homelessness, children living in a domestic violence shelter, or youth who live in public housing. Those who are least likely and these days most at risk of water events to receive this information.
Now, why is that? Are they just not getting the instruction because the parents can't afford it? The parents can't take them to get instruction? The children don't want to go? Why in the poorer neighborhoods do we find this is happening?
I think, David, the crux of the issue is there's no culture around water safety, locally, nationally. And what trickles down is a lot of different things. Parents totally play a role in the education, but realistically, if half the population doesn't have the water safety knowledge themselves, then how can they be responsible to pass it on?
So it's almost like, well, my dad didn't learn how to swim, so I don't need to learn how to swim, and I don't have to teach my son how to learn how to swim. It just
or my dad said, don't go near the water because it's dangerous.
Right.
Something happened to me. So you grow up never going near it and teaching your children never to go near it. But really, this is a lack of culture and a total socioeconomic issue.
So how do you get the word out? How do you or your organization let it be known to those in these underprivileged communities that basically you're there to help them learn how to swim and to protect themselves if they're in the water? How do you get the word out?
You know, it's a grassroots effort. We're on foot during the off season, going around different developments and sharing the opportunity. But what we're doing now, and we're launching in time for spring summer 2025, is a public safety awareness campaign around water safety, and specifically what's killing the most New Yorkers right now, which is rip currents.
I want to talk about that.
Please.
I'm definitely afraid of rip currents. I mean, they always say you're supposed to. I think you're supposed to swim. Is it horizontal in such a way so that you're not fighting the rip current? I'm very afraid of that. And when I go swimming and I'm out in the ocean and I'm with my son, I always make sure that we're aware of the rip currents, because that's something that you have to know is there before you even get into the water. Is that the main cause of drownings, the rash of drownings throughout New York City, Brooklyn? Is it the rip currents, or is it just the individuals just don't know how to swim?
I think the principal issue is a lack of situational awareness around water. Making that even more complex is these beasts of rip currents that we have that are only getting more severe, whether it be for the storms or the jetties that we're putting in to protect our shoreline. It's just building and getting worse. So the stat that I read kind of recently was 80% of the saves that the lifeguards are going in the water for are because of rip current. And 90% of the reasons people are drowning are from rip currents.
Is rip current a result of climate change? Is it just the new danger that we're all looking out for? I mean, we've heard about rip currents, but now we hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
Why?
It's intensifying. It's intensifying because the water is getting more turbulent during storms. It's intensifying because our shorelines are eroding, and we're putting in structures like jetties, which are really important. But when we put them in, they're creating these basic sucks in the middle of the swim zone. And as the tides come in and the water comes up, it's got to go back out.
So, I mean, I know I gave a little bit of a tutorial half a second ago, but
Yeah.
how do you fight, or how do you prevent a rip tide? Because you don't want to fight a rip
No.
a rip tide, a rip current. I mean, what do you do?
Well, first thing is prevent yourself from going in it.
Yeah.
If you know how to see it and identify it, you know not to go in that part of the water. But let's say you don't and you find yourself in one. First rule is do not panic. As soon as you start to panic, you're using your energy, and you're probably fighting against this like conveyor belt that's bringing you out. Don't do that. Relax, let it take you out, okay? And once you start to feel the current loose, not being so intense, swim parallel to shore. Like you said, horizontal, swim parallel to shore. So let it take you out and then swim parallel to
Parallel
shore.
to shore. The drownings.
Yeah.
They do occur fairly frequently in our city, and certainly Far Rockaway in different places. Where are the lifeguards? I'm a little confused.
So I want to say,
And why are you allowed in the water?
right, first of all, the stats aren't, for lack of better words, pure. They're only capturing deaths that happen in regulated swimming areas. So, for example, the 2 little boys who fell in the Harlem River, those are not part of the stat. So what we're really looking at when we say 7, absolutely 7, but there's more.
There's more.
There's more. So to really get our arms around the issue, we have to clean up the way we're collecting the data, which right now we're not comprehensively doing. So that's one. And to your question about, forgive me, why people are drowning?
It just, why are they going in the pool?
Oh, sorry.
Or the pool. Why are they going into the ocean when there are no lifeguards? Why isn't there somebody patrolling the ocean, and making sure that no one's allowed in?
Do you think it's realistic to close the ocean?
Well, you can't close the ocean, but I think we could do more to supervise.
Sure.
To make sure that these kids aren't, showing up at 11 o'clock at night and deciding to go for a swim, and there's no one around.
I can say that for the last year and a half, at least, I've been working with parks as part of a task force, and I can see that they are doing everything within their power to make the change. They have, which is, I don't know that it's gotten enough attention, the Parks Commissioner and Deputy Parks Commissioner were able to affect change in the last year or less than a year, more so than the last 40 years.
How so?
Well, they went through the arbitration process with the union. They made headway on like 4.5 out of the six points. And that has given them, you know, I would think, the latitude to do what they know they need to do in order to bring up the ranks of the lifeguard corps.
Let's talk about legislation.
Sure.
What's pending? What's coming down the road? What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, we have had on the state level, we, as in myself, as part of the Water Safety Coalition, have put forward a few times now legislation that would mandate a 10-minute conversation in the schools in the state, just to give everyone, you know, a very basic primer on water safety.
Kindergarten, first grade, second grade?
K through 12.
K through 12.
K through 12. So that continues to fall short. It's not getting through, and right now it's sitting with a collection of other bills on a desk somewhere. So I don't know what it's going to take on the state, other than I've been told that it's nearly impossible to amend curriculum. So that's that.
You know, interestingly, you know, you can't drive a car without a license. You need to take driver's lessons, and we make sure you can't drive to protect not just yourself but anyone else around you. You'd think there'd be something that would mandate that we make sure that the young people take certain tests, so we know they know how to swim if there's an emergency, if they fall off a boat or something happens. But there isn't. It's as if it's a cultural thing. It's
a cultural thing, and our elders aren't necessarily water literate. So who's passing it on to us?
Yeah,
it's a cultural.
And we're talking
issue.
about legislation or other things.
Legislation. So you might have noticed that City Council has put forward a few pieces on the city side for legislation, all of which are positive because, one, it's bringing awareness. Two, it's getting us closer to where we need to be, which is actually teaching people how to swim, but also bringing them water safety education.
All right, so where are we heading? Look at a crystal ball. A couple of years from now, are we safer? Are we not as safe? Where are we heading in terms of this? This is really a very important issue. Culturally, you almost have to change the culture.
Exactly.
Where do you think we're going to be in 2-3 years? You know, the oceans are going to be warmer. The tides are going to be, rip tides are going to be more prevalent.
And it's going to be hotter.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're for sure at a tipping point. The numbers are up 12-15% nationally. They're up in New York City. We've just tied our own record. Could it get worse? Absolutely. But I really hope it doesn't. And I really hope that what's going to actually make us round a corner is if they can free up some money for programming, because there's people, you know, organizations like Rising Tide, like Swim Strong, who are out there who have the teachers and the curriculum. We just need the money to fund the program in the pool.
All right. Let's say there's somebody watching today,
Yep.
A mom or a dad, they're from a tougher area, and they're like, you know what, this is important. I got to teach Junior how to swim or learn how to swim myself. What would you recommend? What do you do? Where do you even start when you're from one of these tougher neighborhoods? Where do you find a pool? Where do you find an instructor? You know, where does it all begin?
That's tough, and that's what we're trying to figure out right now. You know, 2 million New Yorkers live in a swimming desert, no access to swimming whatsoever. Only 30% of New Yorkers live within 15 minutes transit of a pool. So I think for any parent, the biggest leap is going to be freeing themselves up to take their child to a facility, wherever it is. And I think that unfortunately needs to be the first step.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think the first step is having you here just to talk about it. I think is really the first step. But what else would you suggest?
We gotta start talking about it at the kitchen table.
Okay, all right.
Got to.
And we'd like you to come back and tell us what's been going on.
Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you, Kaitlin. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back right after this. All right, welcome back. The Protecting Animals Walking on the Street, or PAWS Act, was introduced recently and will increase penalties against a driver when a pet is injured or killed in a car crash. Under current law, injuring or killing a pet or service animal with a motor vehicle results in a fine equivalent to an illegal U-turn. So to tell us more about this, we turn to Libby Post from the New York State Animal Protection Federation. Hello, Libby.
Hi, thanks for having me on today.
Good, it's nice to see you. I want you to know, just heads up, I've become a dog person. I have a golden doodle, and he's my best friend. Not that my wife isn't, but I love my dog, and I'm constantly watching out for him and making sure that cyclists don't hit him and cars don't hit him. They become a part of the family. Is that natural?
Oh, absolutely. We've got two golden retrievers, one of whom we got the old-fashioned way from a breeder, although when we went to the breeder, I felt like we were rescuing him or her. And then we got another golden from an Amish puppy mill in Ohio, where the option was somebody come and get her, or I'm going to take her out back and shoot her, because they had bred her from her first heat every 6 months after that. And we got her when she was 6 years old. So we figured she had 11 puppies, litters of puppies. She was spent. She couldn't have any more. And that was the option. I mean, the Amish puppy mills are just cash cows for these folks, and they don't treat their animals well. And so we rescued Sophie, and she had puppy mill PTSD, and it took her a while, but after 2.5 years, she's like a regular old dog.
Libby, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the time has come where we're starting to see pets as more than just pets? I mean, in the law, they're treated as property many times, not treated as beings. But I think it's changing. I think the culture is changing. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think people are spending, a lot of money on their animals, taking care of them, vet bills and food and all the funny costumes, that we put on them at Halloween, and that there is a sea change in how we view our pets, that they are part of our family. Legally they're seen as property. Changing that is going to be a bit of a lift. But what we can do is change legislation like the Simone Gennardis bill to increase penalties if you mistreat an animal.
Well, this is fascinating to me. How the penalty could be only the equivalent of making an illegal U-turn when you kill a dog or on the street when you're driving. I think that's crazy. I mean, these owners will suffer for years after losing a pet, and the driver gets a fine for an illegal U-turn.
Right, and I can tell you that when it comes
by the way, that picture looks like my dog right there. Sorry.
when it comes to animal crimes, real animal cruelty, this is an accident. This bill is addressing motor vehicle accidents and a dog or a service dog being hit by a car and killed. And that's what this bill is addressing, and it's increasing the penalties from, $50 to a higher penalty, monetary. It's not going to be enough to pay for a new dog, and the person who loses the dog isn't necessarily going to get the money. But what we need to look at is increasing and heightening the penalties for this kind of incident, but also for animal crimes. Because right now, the highest anybody can be charged for an animal crime is an E felony, which is the lowest felony on the books. And we know that there's a desire not to increase penalties, right?
Why?
Legislature.
Why is that?
Because I think it's part of, and I'm not slamming bail reform. I think bail reform was important or anything like that. But I think it's part of the culture now with the leadership in both houses not wanting to demonize and put more people in jail for low-level crimes, okay? And so what we need to have happen is for crimes against animals to be seen as higher-level crimes. Like, for example, we are working to put dogfighting in the organized crime statute, which would increase the felony penalties, that's for sure, because organized crime and dogfighting, dogfighting is part of organized crime because it's human trafficking is involved as well, drug trafficking, gun trafficking. All of that is all wrapped into also dogfighting. And it's a multi-state operation when you have dogfighting. And we see this over and over and over again. So if we can have dogfighting be part of the organized crime statute, those crimes will be prosecuted at a higher level and people will go to jail. Right now, what we're trying to
are
do
there
is
limitations
increase
to this bill?
those penalties.
Do you find that there are limitations to this bill?
This bill, the bill that the Simone Gennardis bill is a good start, and it's a civil start because there's no criminal penalties here. There's monetary penalties, and so it'll be interesting to see how that is responded to by the leadership in both houses. Gennardis and Simone are both Democrats in each house, and the Democrats can control each house and as we know, the executive chamber, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. And so we have to start changing the culture. And what's great is we do have leadership in both houses that value animals. I mean, we have Mike Gianaris in the Senate, who was the sponsor of the puppy mill bill. He sponsored the insurance bill, where no longer insurance companies can no longer discriminate against homeowners based on the breed of dog that they have. And we're trying to get that done for renters, and he carries that bill as well in the Senate. And we have people like Linda Rosenthal and Deborah Glick and Amy Pollin in the Assembly who carry bills. John McDonald, who's local to Albany, is starting to carry these bills. And so I think that there's this sense that we have to do something to protect animals and really fight against animal crimes, because the Federation does an annual animal crimes training, and we've done a really good job of raising the awareness about animal crimes in law enforcement, district attorneys, the state troopers, the whole gamut. And what we're seeing is they're taking these crimes more seriously, but it is part of the reason why the shelters are overcrowded, because the shelters end up holding the live evidence. It's not like a dog is a TV set that you can put in a closet. You have to care for these animals. You have to give them vet care. You have to, make sure that they're eating and that they are getting walked and all of that. And so it has added to the overcrowding in the shelters and the cost of it. We had a situation in Albany over the winter where an unregistered rescue had 100 dogs in a house, a bunch of dead animals in a freezer, as well as 2 kids in the house. Each of the people responsible were charged with 100 counts of animal cruelty. But Mohawk Hudson Humane Society, who took those animals in, it cost them $800,000 the first month to care for these animals. And it's one of the reasons we're asking the governor to include $2.5 million in her budget for an animal crimes fund to help offset those costs.
And what are the thoughts with that? Does it look like that's going to happen?
She's been great on animal crimes and animal issues. She signed the puppy mill bill. She signed all of our bills. She hasn't vetoed one. She put the Companion Animal Capital Fund into her budget, which is a fund that helps with capital projects at shelters, to help offset those costs, because we need to enhance the physical plants of our shelters. So I'm feeling positive about the fact that she might very well put this $2.5 million fund in her budget.
What would you say to those who argue, well, this is really just another way of making people a little bit more careful in terms of driving? We really don't care so much about the animals. We just want to make sure you're not as reckless.
Well, I mean, there is that point to be made, but the fact of the matter is that you need to be careful when you're driving regardless, whether it's a person or a dog or a raccoon on the street. I just driving here, I passed, a dead raccoon on the side of the road because somebody hit it, right? When I'm driving and there's one house that's filled with ducks in the front yard because it's near a pond, I slow down. I don't want to hit any of those ducks that are crossing the road. I stop for rabbits and squirrels. I mean, these are the things that we have to do, as it's up to us as human beings to take care of our animals, whether they're companion animals or wildlife.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the service animals and the companion animals, because they are such an important part of our community. Does the bill give them a little bit more protection with respect to injuries or death that occurs?
Well,
I'll give you an example. You know, if you injure a police officer, let's say, you know,
Right.
you're gonna have a stiffer fine or a stiffer penalty because we value our law enforcement. Are we valuing our service dogs and our companion animals?
Well, I think this bill does send a message that we need to be much more careful when we're driving our cars, and that yes, we are valuing these animals. The idea that you get a slap on the wrist and a $50 fine for killing a service dog, somebody who uses, somebody who's blind and uses a service dog, or other kinds of service dogs, that just seems outrageous because of the amount of time, energy, and money that's put into training that dog. And then what happens to this person who has now lost their dog and can't function in society because that dog helped them do that? So I think it sends a message that we need to value our animals more, our companion animals and our service animals more. But look, this is about people just being responsible when they're driving. And you can say all day long, we're going to fine you, we're going to fine you, we're going to fine you. But there are people who are just not going to be responsible when they're driving. And these two guys are based out of New York City. When I drive in New York City, I see all these dogs being walked and people not really paying attention. And people need to pay attention.
We're going to leave it there. Libby, thanks very much. As I told you, I've become an animal lover, and we'd love to have you come back and give us a little bit of update on the bill, if that's okay.
No problem.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesch, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesch, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. You take care.